Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Delray Beach Chamber of Commerce's weekly webinar. As always, these webinars are recorded and you can find them on Facebook, on YouTube, and on the Chamber's website underneath the webinars tab. So today we have a pretty exciting webinar for you today. Nonprofit board service, you absolutely have what it takes. So in this session, we'll explore what board service is, what it's not, plus how to connect with the right cause for you. Tune in to learn how your skills and strengths can be the perfect match and a game changer for a nonprofit board that truly needs you. And this webinar today is presented by National Leadership Institute. And we have Mr. Jerry Zarnecki and Raylen Barlow who are joining us today. So Jerry is the chairman and founder of the National Leadership Institute. And Jerry is a sought-after national consultant with an unbridled passion for giving back to the nonprofit world. A self-described governance fanatic, Jerry has served on more than 50 international, national, and local nonprofit boards, including United Way, the Nature Conservatory, and the Junior Achievement Worldwide. He has presented at national and international conferences around the globe and continues a diverse, successful C-suite career, spanning industries from banking to retail to television production and aviation. We love having Jerry on. He's done a few speaking arrangements for us, and we always love to have him here. So next we will have Raylen Barlow. She is the president and CEO of National Leadership Institute, home of Board Match Now. Raylen which is a nonprofit dedicated to the board development and leadership training. She manages the content planning, marketing, and presenting of contemporary educational programs, workshops, and conferences focused on board governance and leadership development, led by best-in-class facilitators and instructors. She is the co-creator of Board Match Now, National Leadership Institute's preparatory software program, which matches nonprofits with passionate, charitable-minded board member candidates. So at this time, I would like to welcome Jerry and Raylen to join us, and we're going to turn it over to them, and they are going to give you a presentation today.
Good morning. Angel, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well today, doing well. It's a beautiful day outside.
It is. And Jerry, how are you? You're in Boca?
I'm great, thank you. I'm great. How about you, Raylen?
We're all over the place. So, this is a topic, Angel, that we love to talk about, nonprofit board service. It is what we do. It is what we are passionate about. It's what I became passionate about because of Jerry. So what we're going to do today is kind of take a little bit of the fear out of nonprofit board service and help people understand that so many people out there have what boards need, what nonprofit boards need. We're going to talk about what the role is, what you do, maybe what you don't do, and kind of bust a few myths, if you will. So Jerry, let's start with, I have some slides here. I'm going to pop them up and let's hope everything works. Technology-wise, we're going to go from the beginning slide here. And I think we are set. So by the way, Angel, I don't know if you know this, we might have said this before, but we've been doing programs like this with the Delray Chamber now for about 4.5 years. So we've got an anniversary coming up, a 5-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh, we have to send you something then because we love having you guys here.
That was not a shameless plug for a present. that was just kind of I realized it this morning as I was looking over our notes from stuff. So nonprofit board service, explaining why you absolutely have what it takes and who makes a good board member is what we're going to talk about. The reason we feel like we're qualified to talk about this, folks, is because board training is what we do, led by Jerry and our team of NLI experts. We also match people in the community to nonprofit boards now. We've created this dating app like service, a technology tool that takes people in the community and finds the right cause for them. And I'm super excited about it because it's my baby. So Jerry's had to adopt that baby as well. And he is all about technology. So that was, he's a big fan of Board Match Now. And leadership development, being part of a board means being a leader. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's first talk about Jerry.
Raylen, I don't see your slides.
You're not seeing the slides? Angel, are
I'm
you?
not.
No, we're not.
Well, they are up on my screen and showing display, and I'm in the slideshow. So let me try. Do I have screen sharing ability?
Yes, you do.
Okay, let me try this again real fast and we will see what happens. And if not, we'll just talk.
Raylen
Okay.
knows that I'm more than happy to just talk.
Oh, wonderful.
Hey,
We have it
she
up
did
on
it.
screen.
All right.
did
So,
it.
oh, you missed our smiling mug shots. Okay, and that's good. We don't need those because you've got these smiling shots. So, okay, let's get to the screen that we'd like to be on. We've told you about us. We've told you what we're going to talk about. So, Jerry, let's start out with myth busting. The common misconception is that you have to be a C-suiter, a CEO, a CMO, a bigwig, a name in the community. You have to be a name. Is that true or not true? Talk to us about it.
The answer to that is split. It's a split decision. All right.
Ooh.
There are some really big global or national organizations that have humongous budgets, have wide reach, and those people probably are looking for global or national leaders at the top of large organizations because of a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which is they want the funding support from those organizations. So
The
let's
F
not kid
word,
ourselves.
funding.
The big global national organizations are going to want heavyweights, as the expression goes. Just it's going to be.
Okay.
But by far and away, not just the majority, but the largest percentage of not-for-profits in the world out there, particularly, let's say, in the United States, because this is where large not-for-profits and small not-for-profits alike tend to be domiciled in the United States. In the vast, vast majority of cases, the smaller regional, local, or even statewide organizations are looking for people who are engaged and passionate, not looking for title. And when I say engaged, that means that they're looking for skill sets that can help them do their job as a not-for-profit. So the answer on the 99% of the not-for-profits is absolutely not. You do not need to be one of those heavyweights. What you need to do is bring something to the table. And we can talk more about that, but that's the key to keep in mind. And the most important something you bring is passion for what that not-for-profit does.
I was counting down to how long it would take you to say that word because that is so critical to being a great board member. So I think, Jerry, what you've taught me and what we like to say is that basically the reality is for most nonprofits, particularly the smaller to medium size, if you are charitable minded, if you are passionate, if you are committed, if you are involved in your community or want to be, then regardless of your business title, you can be of great service to a nonprofit board. You have so much to offer. And I think a lot of people have a little bit of fear. Um, in fact, I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome because this came up recently with one of our Board Match Now candidates. Her name is Whitney, and she's given me permission to share this story. So, as she was helping us with some marketing for Board Match Now, our technology tool, she went through the profile and answered all the questions, her professional expertise, her personal strengths. She basically created her profile and talked about herself. And all of a sudden, she looked at me and she goes, I never thought that I would have what it takes to be on a board. And I do. She goes, I've been suffering from imposter syndrome. I thought I wasn't enough yet. I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't a CMO. I'm up and coming. And it was a great conversation because I think it really opened my eyes to the fear some people have. Being on a board sounds daunting. It sounds like a frightening job.
Well, I will add something to that, and that is the vast majority of us in our careers, the vast majority of the steps along the way in our careers, vast majority of us don't get into a boardroom of any sort.
Mhm.
So the vast majority of us, as we're climbing that corporate ladder, climbing that ladder of whatever our career may be, we hear about a board, but it's a mystical something over there that we have no experience with. And so one of the reasons why this imposter syndrome, as you described it, happens is that because anything that we don't know anything about, anything that is stated to be important, has a mysticism about it and has a mystery about it that basically masks the reality that goes on there. So it's not surprising that people don't feel like they could be a board member, because first of all, most of them have no idea what goes on in a board.
And
As a
we're
matter of
gonna
fact, there are some people on boards themselves that don't know what goes on in a board, but that's a whole nother matter.
that's a whole other topic we could talk about if Angel would let us. Board members who need to not be there, but
Right.
we won't go there today. We'll steer clear of that one. So, you mentioned, we talked about all the small nonprofits out there, and I pulled up some quick stats for this webinar today. So according to the IRS in 2016, which is the latest stat I could find available, there were about 4,500 nonprofits in Palm Beach County. Well, if you go to this tracking organization called Tax Exempt World, as of May this year, just 3 weeks ago, they said there were 13,597 nonprofits in Palm Beach County. Registered nonprofits. Now, they're not all active, but 13,000, think about that. So think about the number of nonprofits that need boards, because you have to have one. You have to have a board, and you have to have 3 members by law, right? You cannot be in existence without having a board and registering your 3 members. And out of that number, that whichever number you want to take, 4,400 or 13,000, 1,100 of those are in Delray Beach alone. So there are nonprofits everywhere that we don't even know about, hear about, that are quietly doing their good work, and they need board members. Everybody needs at least 3, correct?
Well, let me add something there, and that is just drop back one step. And the fact is that Raylen made a statement which some of you may not really have thought about, and that is, first of all, the not-for-profits that exist, that 1,190 not-for-profits that exist in Delray Beach, have a charter. The charter is typically a corporate charter. Virtually no not-for-profit that I know of is actually an LLC. So it tends to be a corporate charter, and it's registered with the state. And when it's a corporation, it is a corporation that is in the state known as a not-for-profit. But the notion that it is a corporation means that it has to have a board of directors. Whether it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit, there is a board. Now, the board could end up being a one-person board, but as a practical matter, the vast majority of not-for-profits, we're going to have a whole lot more than 1, 2, or 3 board members. So the key point that Raylen is making here is that these 1,190 not-for-profits, if they're operating as an entity with a thing going on, whatever it may be, they need board members. And all too often, they are struggling to get board members. The local not-for-profits are typically struggling to get an effective full board as they would define it. And that's something to keep in mind. There is a demand for board members. So when you start talking about myths, the first myth is that all not-for-profits have all the board members they need. That is a huge myth. Most not-for-profit boards don't have all the board members they need, and they're searching.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly why we created Board Match Now, to try and help nonprofits find board members faster and easier. It's a tech tool to connect people that may otherwise never have found each other. So we'll talk about that before we wrap up a little bit. But I want to get back to something we talk about a lot: passionate purpose. So where would you start if someone listening right now wants to become a board member and they realize maybe they do have what it takes? And we'll talk about the roles and responsibilities next. But if they're thinking about it, it all starts with this passionate purpose, which you've talked about. And Jerry, I want you to say that in your words, because you tell it so well. If this isn't there, there's no reason to go on a board, right?
Not only that, but ultimately, if you go on that board and you don't have the passion for the purpose that is defined in that not-for-profit, ultimately, you will burn out. Ultimately, you will show your true colors, and your true colors will be, I'm here because I'm here, not I'm here because I'm committed or passionate, but I'm here because I'm here. And unfortunately, and I say this very sincerely, as a matter of fact, this is actually one of the reasons why I founded the National Leadership Institute in the first place. All too often, boards are populated by people who either, one, don't have passion for what they're involved in that not-for-profit, or if they have it, they don't have enough of it to be engaged. So it's important. We're starting with the notion of passion, and it's hard to be engaged in anything without passion. But passion alone is not enough if you're not willing to commit that passion to the not-for-profit. So I could be passionate about a cause, but I'm so busy and I'm so occupied in everything else I'm doing that I don't think I have the time to actually engage and commit to that cause. If that's you, don't do it. If that's you, even if you have passion, don't do it, because you cannot be effective if you're not engaged.
And you know what? It's interesting to think about too. If you don't have that passion for the cause, if if children's causes are what stir your soul, move you, if it's animals, if it's veterans, if it's feeding the hungry, whatever cause it is, if it's leadership like we teach, whatever that cause is, you have one of the things a new board member will do is work. So there is some work involved. So, you know, when you have the passion and that fire in your belly to do it, it doesn't really feel like work. And one of the statistics we share is that the average board member, the average nonprofit expects about 4 to 10 hours a month of work from a nonprofit board member. Now that's an average. Every board is different. Every board has different requirements and different responsibilities, but about 4 to 10 hours a month. So if you're going to give that up out of your precious time, who would you want to give it to? What cause really moves you? And I think that puts it a little bit in perspective if you have a time value on it.
Well, and I'll add that it is obvious that there are board members who effectively the only time they give is to go to a board meeting, if they go at all. All right. And so if you're one of those board members who doesn't have time to even go to a board meeting, don't sign up. And so it is, as Raylen just said, you have to decide what's important to you. And if this concept of giving back to the community, to the society, if this concept of giving back is something that resonates with you, then a not-for-profit can be the place for you to do that. But if that concept doesn't resonate with you, if giving back itself is something you feel nothing about, if it's not something that's embedded in the core values that you have, then you're not a candidate for a not-for-profit. Because as Raylen points out, you will work as a not-for-profit board member. You will work. Now, you'll work as a board member no matter where you are, but the work that you do for a not-for-profit, it's uncompensated. So you have to recognize that you're giving away valuable time and you're getting zilch for cash for doing it. So if you're giving away that valuable time and you're not getting any compensation in the form of cash, then the only compensation that you can say you're getting is the satisfaction that you're giving back, that you're doing something good for humanity, for society, or for your local community, or for individuals within your local community who are the beneficiaries of that not-for-profit.
Mhm. I just spoke with a young professional gentleman yesterday, and he has worked with 6 different nonprofits in Broward County, and he listed them, and I knew them all by name, and he's done some great work with them. And I said, you know, you're so fired up about each of these. He gave me the nutshell, the overview of each of the nonprofits, and he could rattle it off like this. He was a great brand ambassador, but he wasn't on the board. And I said, why aren't you on the board? And he paused. He had no real answer. And then later he came back to me and he said, you know, I like my space. I like being able to go to an event and to volunteer and to donate and to support, but I don't have enough time right now to get back on a board. And it's in my plan for next year out of the 5 nonprofits he volunteers his time with. So he's really looking at it like, I've got 5 things I love, but I don't have that extra time and I want to spread myself amongst the 5. Next year, he says he's picking one and he will go on the board. Well, I guess the board will have to accept him, but he's going to make his best effort to go on a board. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. He's choosing the volunteer route because he's very aware of his time and commitments. So let's talk about the role. Just big picture, Jerry, we teach this all the time in different ways from um, the 2 different types of boards. We'll talk about that a little bit, but what's the big picture? What's a board member's job? Once they're on the board, what's their job?
Well, here is the thing that way too many people on boards, no matter what kind of a board they are, the board is there for a reason, legally and practically, but starting legally, the board is in charge. All right. That statement that I just made is actually really important, but most boards and board members don't pay enough attention to the you're in charge part of your job. The board is but here in the not-for-profit community, the board represents the community. The board represents the city, state, local entity that's around that not-for-profit, in which that not-for-profit operates. And as the board member, you are a fiduciary. You're standing in the place of the community that not-for-profit serves. So you're the watchdog, the monitor, as Raylen has on her slide, for the entirety of the operation. Now, you've got an executive director, a president, chief executive officer, whatever that title is, it doesn't really matter. You've got the full-time somebody who is in charge of making stuff happen.
They run the
That
day-to-day
somebody,
operations, the full-time somebody.
exactly, somebody who is in charge of what's going on. That person is in charge of what's going on, but that person is responsible to the ultimate entity called the board, who is ultimately responsible for everything that happens. Now, that's a strange set of circumstances, but it is the way it is. And it's not just the way a not-for-profit is, it's the way corporate boards operate in the for-profit world. The board is in charge, the executive officers run the business, but the board's ultimately responsible for what's going on. The board delegates by virtue of its powers of being in charge, delegates to the chief executive, the executive director, the responsibility to run the show. And that's what happens, is that delegation goes to the person who's in charge of the day-to-day operations. But as a board member, we never lose the responsibility for oversight. When we delegate to the operating entity, the run it place, then our level of responsibility becomes far more strategic and far more oversight oriented. So that's critical step 1. Critical step 2 is
I want to
Go ahead.
I want to stop you there. I like when I can interrupt you. It's fun. Okay, so a key thing to point out, and executive directors or CEOs of nonprofits like me, we don't really like to be reminded of this, but it's true. The board can fire the executive director or CEO. The board can hire and fire. The board's role in oversight is critical. They're there to make sure the daily operations are being carried out based on the strategy that the board and the leadership team has set for themselves for the year, the 3 years, the 5 years, whatever their strategic plan may be. But the board can get rid of the leader of the organization. And that's a tricky position. That's uncomfortable.
Well, the fundamental fact is that is, other than the overview and the recognition of the responsibility for the strategic direction of the enterprise, it is the single most significant thing a board does, which is to hire, nurture, evaluate, coach, and maybe fire the CEO of the enterprise. It is a big responsibility. It is a huge responsibility, not easily executed, because it means you have to make a judgment about how the CEO is doing. You have to make a judgment about what you think the person could be as a CEO, and you have to give feedback. But Raylen's absolutely right. So far we've talked about strategic focus and objectives. We've talked about the responsibility for the executive director. And quite frankly, that third point is the third thing that all boards, and by the way, all three of these things that I'm talking about apply to every kind of board there is. The third thing is to simply monitor how the place is doing. Viewing and monitoring and operationally overseeing to make sure that you know how things are going and that you have a good pulse of the status of the organization. All boards everywhere have those three responsibilities. There is another aspect to the business of being a board member of a not-for-profit that is very different from that of being on the board of a for-profit organization. And I don't know whether Raylen wants me to talk about that now or she wants to go on to her next slide. But
go ahead.
All right. That there is a fourth role. It's actually more difficult to be a not-for-profit board member than it is to be a for-profit board member.
Jerry, we're supposed to be recruiting people in.
No, you're right. You're right. We are, but
we want to be honest about the job and the role and the duties.
And that is the first step is that the not-for-profit board member doesn't get paid to do this. So that passion factor that I talked about before is absolutely essential. And so you're just not going to get paid. Not-for-profit directors do not get paid, period. That's the way it is. All right. The second factor that makes it more difficult is that not-for-profit directors, board members, have a fourth responsibility that is different from the typical board. And that responsibility is to make sure that the organization is funded. To make sure the organization is funded. In the business community, the business model is that the people who run the business are responsible for funding it. Yeah, they're responsible for sales, generating revenue. But in the case of a not-for-profit, unless it's a business enterprise, most of the funding of a not-for-profit comes from charitable philanthropic contributions. And the board owns that responsibility along with the ED. And the board can't run away from it. It's a critical role.
So let's talk about fundraising a little bit, because that is a big distinction between a corporate board member and a nonprofit board member. But fundraising can take so many different, can come about in so many different ways. First of all, you can do the very simple things. You can do social media fundraisers, Facebook fundraisers, for your birthday. We've seen those explode over the last couple years, where people are raising $200 to $2,000 to $5,000 for their own birthday and asking their peers to support a cause that the birthday boy or girl, cares about. It can be going to your business and asking for a donation. It can be hosting an event. It can be writing a check out of your own personal pocket. There's so many ways that a board member can help a nonprofit get funded, but that truly is critical, and that should be on the big picture slide. That is an oversight for sure, because without a board member's role in fundraising, no money, no mission. That nonprofit may cease to exist.
I think it's really important to add that the board is responsible for the oversight and the focus on fundraising, but the bulk of the fundraising doesn't happen because a board member goes out and gets the money contributed. The board member has a responsibility for the funding of the enterprise, but there is a whole staff supposedly there that's focused on that. And the volunteers in the organization provide that funding as well, in part by their volunteering alone. The key here to keep in mind is that boards have to facilitate fundraising. And one way that a board member can facilitate fundraising is very important. The way Raylen said it, today I could send out an email and say, I'd like everybody to recognize my birthday, although I don't like to talk about my birthday anymore, to recognize my birthday and to donate $1,000 to the National Leadership Institute. And I didn't write a check to do that, but I asked others to write that check. I could also turn around and go to a friend of mine and say, you know, you and I have known each other for a long time. I'd like you to talk to Raylen Barlow about how she can help you be able to work with your not-for-profit. Or, oh, by the way, what I'd like you to do is I'd like to have you talk to Raylen Barlow and find out what she does, because she has a contribution to the community that I think it's worth supporting. And I'd love to have you talk to her about it so that she can talk to you about helping her continue to do her mission. Introduction to somebody who might be a funder. So it isn't all a matter of my funding the not-for-profit. It's a matter of my participating in the generating of not-for-profit funding in one way or another.
It's opening doors, it's connections. If you are a community connector, you are the kind of person who would make a great board member. If you're on LinkedIn and you've got a ton of connections, if you're a networker who goes to events, or you want to be, if you're out and about in the community making connections, talking to people, one of a board member's key roles, and it's on any nonprofit, but maybe even more so on a small to medium size, is opening doors, connecting people. You may connect with someone who's willing to make a donation because they have the same passion for the cause, and they know about the cause because you, the board member, talked about it. So, it's fundraising can be frightening, but it doesn't have to be. If you look at it very simply, like open doors and connect like-minded people to the cause, that's really all it is. Although sometimes, yes, it is writing a check. That's your give or get.
I'd like to make sure that everybody understands something that I think is a critical thought process that you have to go through when it comes to fundraising. And that is, you are not begging somebody for money. You are asking somebody to support a cause. And so you're selling the cause. You're not selling a widget that they have to give money to get the widget. You're selling a cause, and a cause is something that people give to because they believe in the cause. And if they believe that this organization that you're involved in deals with that cause effectively, they will give to it if they believe in it. And so this is cause selling. It's not begging for money, it's selling a cause. And by selling the cause, people will cough up money to help the cause. That's what it's all about.
And it shouldn't feel uncomfortable. And I think that's where we circle back to passion. If you truly love the work that the nonprofit does, if you're an animal advocate and you want to work, let's just say, with the Humane Society or equine assisted therapies, if either one of those connect to your heart, and you ask people in your circle to support them financially, to make a small donation, to attend an event, that's being a brand ambassador. That's being a great voice for the nonprofit. That's spreading the word about them in the community. So being a brand ambassador and being a fundraiser kind of go hand in hand, but you never have to think about it like it's got to be all your own money. Yes, you should make a donation. And Jerry, I love the way you describe that. You say your donation should be meaningful to you. If you want to share that.
Yeah, no, look, I have been on a number of boards where we've talked about how much should people give. And I have always viewed this as, I want to know that you, board member, whoever you are, from whatever means you come from, I want to know that you're committed enough to the organization that you will give to the organization something that's meaningful to you. The difference between what a school teacher makes and what the CEO of a Fortune 500 company makes is huge. Sometimes too big, but it's huge. And the difference between what the school teacher gives and what the CEO of a Fortune 500 company gives has everything to do with their earning stream, their capital base, and has therefore, whatever the check is that each writes, it should be a check that's meaningful to them. It isn't something that breaks the bank for them. It isn't something that hurts them or is painful for them, but it's meaningful. And that it's a very soft definition, I admit. But if you know somebody who's making $500,000 a year in income and they write a $500 check to the cause, that's probably not meaningful. If they write a $2 check, that's an insult. So as a practical matter, I don't know what the right number is. I just know that it needs to be meaningful. If it's meaningful, then by golly, excellent. Now, I want to make sure though that we move off of fundraising for a minute. And I want to talk about why you should think about being on a board. And the reason that I want to talk about that is because fundraising is going to be there and you're going to be faced with it and you're going to be asked to do it. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to be a part of what you would do as a board member. The quote, give or get, as Raylen described it. Either give it or get somebody to give it. But there is a far more important reason for you to be on a board. And that is what you bring with you in the way of skills. What you bring with you that's up here and what is in fact of value to the board. And in my mind, that skill set, whatever it is that you are good at, I guarantee you a board love to have you there. If you're really good at something, you will bring value to that board. If you're a good accountant, they're going to love having somebody who understands accounting. If you're good at understanding leadership and you have a good insight into what it's like to be a boss, you can be incredibly valuable to a board. If you're a marketing technician, if you do digital marketing, you're going to be over the moon valuable to a board right now. All right. Whatever your skill set is, whatever you do for a living, whatever you do as a hobby, whatever you have as an interest set somewhere that you've learned about, that can be enormously valuable to the board. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a CEO or a CFO or a chief marketing officer, but if you have skills that that board can use, that management team can rely on to help them, then you're a candidate for a board. And it just simply should not be a barrier to you to say, oh, I don't have any experience on a board. I've never been the chief financial officer. I'm not a controller. I've never been a head of HR. None of that really matters. Titles and job positions don't matter. It's what you bring from here and from your heart to the table to support the management and to support the other board members that matters. So recognize that every board needs a mix of skills, insights, and experiences. And whatever your skills and insights are, there's a board out there that needs that skill, that insight, that experience to help them achieve their goals.
Oh, absolutely. And a well-rounded board should be diverse in many ways. It should have a diverse range of skills, professional skills, like you just mentioned. It should have a diverse range. It should have male and female, gender diversity, race diversity, ethnicity. The board really needs to be a mix of so many skills and diverse backgrounds. So think about that as you look at board service, the board that you're considering joining. What's the makeup? What roles do they have? What professional strengths do they have already? If you're a CPA and they have a CPA, would you want to go on that board and do something else? Where else could you commit your time? Is it a board of all women and you're a man? Would you want to join that board? Maybe it's a question you ask yourself. I see, I reversed it. I didn't say all men and a woman wanting to join the board. I reversed it, Jerry. But basically, the bottom line is board service, it brings a lot to you as a person and as a professional. It is leadership growth. It is learning how to work on a team. It can be a good resume inclusion, but we don't really advocate joining a board just to update your resume or to put more on your LinkedIn profile. Jerry, that's not something you're a fan of, correct?
I'm a huge non-fan of that. I cannot stress enough that if you go onto a board because it's the right board to be, you'll do the same thing I did once a long time ago. You'll wake up one day and realize I'm on this board for all the wrong reasons. I don't belong on this board because I don't have the passion for this. And I can tell you that I have made that mistake a couple of times, but after making it a couple of times, I didn't make it again. And so all you have to do is get on a board for a short period of time that you really don't have a passion for the mission of that board. And you'll realize that you're spending all that time and energy and financial treasure to that extent, and you don't have the fire in your belly for what they're doing. It doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong. It just means that you don't have a passion for it. And if you don't have a passion for it, I strongly recommend that no matter what it does for your resume, it will not do any good for you, because it will waste your time and you will not be gratified, and you will not have the board passion provide you purpose. That linkage, passionate purpose, that Raylen referred to, there's another way to use those two words, that passion can drive purpose and purpose can drive passion. It's a two-way street. If I'm passionate about something, it gives me purpose. And if I have a focus on purpose, it helps me to develop a passion to do those things that are necessary to achieve my purpose. So it's a critical component. And I said it earlier and I'll say it again. The last item on this chart that she's got says it feels good to give back. It does feel good to give back if you think giving back is a good thing. If giving back is not in your mind a part of your value system, then okay, I'm going to irritate the Delray Chamber right now. If giving back is not part of your value system, then you should drop off right now, because we're wasting your time. And so I don't know that I can see whether people are dropping off, but I'm telling you that the not-for-profit service is a service that is founded in the idea that I care about my community, I care about other human beings, and I care about the idea that a not-for-profit private sector solution is as good, or for Jerry, better than a governmental solution. And so in my mind, if you believe that the private sector can do good for the society outside of its businesses, but through the not-for-profit sector, then the not-for-profit board is the place to be, because that's where the action is.
So
If that's not in your wheelhouse, if that doesn't turn you on, if it isn't exciting to you to think that you can help society get better through this private sector enterprise, then don't waste your time fooling around with this idea of a not-for-profit, because it'll just ultimately wear you down.
right, and don't waste a nonprofit's time because technically the board is there to do the roles we've described. And if you're not there for the right reasons, chances are you're not going to do the work that they need. So it comes from both sides. So Jerry, I want to do a quick summary. We've got one more question for you, and then we'll take any questions that Angel or we might have had come in during the webinar. But so just quick summary. A board member is going to be in charge of strategic oversight, the big picture of the organization. You're not in the daily operations. You're not bothering the executive director and in his or her hair all day. You're big picture. You're up here most of the time. There is one difference when you're more of a working board for a smaller organization. I do want to make that distinction before we move on. A working board is really something a smaller nonprofit and up and coming nonprofit might need.
Yeah, Raylen keeps using that working board terminology,
Working board, operating
I'm just
board.
learning. I'm learning to accept it. But let me say it in a slightly different way, and that is that as the board member of a smaller not-for-profit, literally with a smaller budget, as a board member of that kind of a not-for-profit, I guarantee you that you're going to go to your first board meeting and you're going to get a financial presentation at the first board meeting, and you're going to realize that the amount of money they have to solve the problems that that organization is trying to cure is not good enough to be able to have all the staff they need to get everything done that they want to do. You're going to realize that the first board meeting, all right? The small, regional, local, primarily not-for-profits have small budgets, small staff, and big ambitions. Small staff, small budgets, big ambitions. The only way that you get a chance to have a big ambition realized in a small local not-for-profit is that the board members have to be a part of the team that gets stuff done. You will find yourself engaged in stuff that is not high-level governance oversight, but it's going to be low-level, help the accounting function get the books balanced, help the marketing function, and that may just be the executive director, figure out how to increase the messaging power of the website. It's going to be somebody on the board who says, I think that there's an idea that I have about how we could raise some additional money. I'll take on the job of putting together a little event that we can do to try to raise some money. All of that stuff that I just described, it's theoretically stuff that the management team would do, but guess what? When the executive director looks around, they don't find very many people to go look around to give it to. So the board ends up having to be the, quote, engaged board that does what Raylen describes as a working board activity. By the way, just so you know, that there's a parallel to this. If you take a new startup organization in the for-profit world, more often than not, a startup starts out with a person with a dream, and they start trying to build an organization, and they go out and raise a little bit of money, and they start getting some money into the business, and then all of a sudden they find out that the people who gave them the money want to be a part of a board oversight responsibility. And so those people get on the board, 2 or 3 of them get on the board, and all of a sudden they find out that as a board member, they looked around and they looked at the person who started this thing, and this person's a marketing person, and he doesn't know the difference between a debit and a credit. And all of a sudden the board member says, oh my goodness, we need to have some bookkeeping going on here. And this guy doesn't know his from first base about debits and credits. We need to get somebody to be able to keep the books, but we don't have any money to pay them. Maybe I can just use QuickBooks and I can keep the books for a little while. That goes on in startups all over the place, all right? So if it goes on in corporate startups where people are out there to make money, it goes on in not-for-profits as well. End of speech.
Okay. Well, and we will
turn it back to you, Raylen.
We'll talk offline about that term, the working board, an operating board, a small nonprofit board.
I've given up, Raylen. I've given up.
Listen, Jerry, the distinction is there are some people who look at their board as staff, but the majority of nonprofits do not. So we'll leave that there because we're running out of time. Okay, so I have 3 quick questions for you. These are yes or no's. You ready? Should a new board member, prospective board member, know Robert's Rules of Order, know how to run a meeting? Yes or no? Coming in.
No, but you better learn fast.
Okay, no, but learn fast. And by the way, there's like a 1-pager online. You can Google it and it comes up and teaches you all you need to know about Robert's Rules of Order to run a meeting. So it's really not that complicated. Okay, yes or no? Should a board member have any board experience? How does a board member have to have experience to go to a big nonprofit?
Go to a big nonprofit?
Go to a big, medium to large nonprofit.
It depends on what you mean by experience. If you're talking about experience on a board, probably not. If you're talking about substantive experience that gives you the chance to make strategic value contribution, yes.
Okay. I was talking about moving from a small board to a big board. Do you need some mini board experience before you jump into a large organization's board?
It's helpful.
It's helpful. Okay. Can board service be fun? We've talked about some serious work here, 4 to 10 hours a month or more. Is it fun?
It better have been, because those 50 boards I sat on would have been drudgery otherwise.
Okay. All right. And then Angel, I'm going to bring it back to you. There was one other slide I was going to mention real quickly about why board service is good for your business. So I'm just going to hit these highlights as a final thought. If your business, think about it this way, there is a symbiotic relationship, and there should be. There's nothing wrong with that. If you as a small business owner decide to join a nonprofit and partner with them, you reach new people. You get more brand awareness. It's positive PR opportunities. If you have a staff, your employees like to know that a company is giving back to the community. It makes them trust you more. You can retain your employees more. It's a better job culture. There are so many benefits to a business partnering with a nonprofit. That's a whole nother webinar that we did another time. So real quickly, Board Match Now is our tool, National Leadership Institute's tool. That's like the dating app, a technology tool to match people in the community with a nonprofit. So we'd love to talk to anyone about that who's interested. And then Angel, back to you if we've got any questions.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Let's get us all back on screen. We did have a comment from one of our viewers just saying that it was very interesting watching you guys go back and forth.
We try not to bicker on these things, but you never know what's going to happen with the two of us. We've worked together a long time.
Well, as always, guys, I thank you for joining us and for your insight and frankly, your candor on the matter. Like it's always refreshing to have that, and your webinars afterwards that always leave me at least feeling inspired. So we do have a couple of questions. I know you asked a couple and I was like, oh my goodness, no, save them for me. Guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them down. We do have them for a couple of minutes to answer some questions. And before we get started, I gotta say, I never thought about asking for a birthday donation on Facebook, even though I see it all of the time for, animal shelters or, cancer awareness. I just never thought that I could do it for a smaller nonprofit or not for profit. And I don't know why. So that was quite a little revelation for me. So you said something in the beginning that I just wanted to get some insight on. Why do not-for-profits struggle in finding board members? Why is that an issue?
Well, I think I'll answer this. Jerry will probably have the better answer, but what we hear in the community, what I hear in my role as a nonprofit, because we are a small to medium-sized nonprofit. I am very much like some of the nonprofits we've talked about in this session, our organization is. And, you have to be out there recruiting. You have to network. You have to outreach to people. You have to sell them on being a board member. Then you have to onboard them. You have to train them. There is a whole chunk of work that goes into getting a board member. And sometimes an executive director or a CEO is so busy doing the mission, the work that they do, that trying to recruit and find and train board members is a whole nother job. So
Yeah.
there are only so many hours in the day. And what we hear a lot is, I don't really have connections. I don't know where to start. I don't know people. There's a lot of reasons why nonprofits struggle to find board members. And Jerry, you probably have something to add to that.
Yeah, well, I'd add, look at it from the quote potential board member side, and that is that a lot of people who get involved in a not-for-profit mission and who are passionate about it, they volunteer, right? Raylen used that example earlier on and got a guy who's doing volunteering at what I think she said 5 not-for-profits. And he said, I don't have the time to be on a board because I'm doing all this volunteering for 5 different not-for-profits, all of which I think are great. So here's a person who is really giving back, but he's giving back to 5 not-for-profits. And if he goes on a board, he's going to have to limit how much time he does volunteering to the other not-for-profits because this board's going to eat up a lot of his time. So that's one. 2 is there are a lot of people out there who simply, as Raylen started this session, don't believe that they're ready to be a board member. And so they don't even think about the possibility that they could be on a board of a local not-for-profit that they're involved in. They didn't even think about the fact that that not-for-profit might even be interested in having them. And so they don't even show themselves up as an opportunity to be a board member. And then the third reason I think is quite simply that, and this is important to keep in mind. It puts balance on what we've been selling here as an idea today, and that is when you're in your early part of your career, let's just say in the ramp up stage of your career, wherever you are on that curve, you have a tendency to be spending, if you are anywhere near ambitious and anywhere interested in growing in your job, you're probably spending significant additional energy on improving your position in your workplace. And you probably are saying to yourself, I don't know that I have the time to do a not-for-profit thing while I'm trying to grow my career.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's an issue that you can't get past. My way of getting past it always was, I think that this is a good diversion for me. It gets me out of my career focus and it gets me into, quite frankly, being a human being. All right. Now, I will admit there is nobody in this entire session, nobody, I just know it, and this is an arrogant statement, nobody attending this session works harder in their aspect of their career than I did in the same time in my career. I am a fanatic at working. One could argue I'm still a fanatic at working, but
I was
but
just
I am
gonna
a fanatic.
say,
I know, I saw her fidgeting over there. I was like, oh, she's
Yeah.
gonna say something.
yeah, when did that
So
stop?
I know
Hello?
what hard work means, and I know what passion about doing my job means. But I always tried to find time to be doing something else to balance my life. And one way to balance my life was to spend time with my wife and family, priority 2 in my life, or 1A and 1B. And then always tried to find something outside of the work environment that would give me the sense of purpose about community and about the society as a whole. Now that's that idealist in me. There is an idealist buried inside this hard-nosed businessman. But as a practical matter, I always tried to have some part of me that was not hard-nosed business. And by the way, I spent my career fixing broken companies and broken businesses. So I was very much accustomed to being buried by all of that work, but I still found a way to find some time for something else. And I think that all of us, in a sense, and to be honest with you, and then I'll quit, it's almost therapy to
Right.
have a diversion in your career. It's
Yeah.
almost therapy to be able to say, I'm doing something other than this wildly passionate focus on my career.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can totally see that, and I can see how it is a way to kind of center yourself a little bit. It gives you that extra dynamic to realize your life isn't all just work and home. It can be something more, which is great to kind of remember and keep in the back of your mind, guys. All right. So now that I have that, if I want to join a board with the points about passion and obviously being cognizant about the amount of time you have to offer, do you have any pointers on where I should start?
Oh,
Angel,
that sounds like a question Raylen wrote.
I really didn't. I didn't. Okay, so shameless plug. Hello. Board match now. That's why we created your very question goes to the whole reason. I've been working with national leadership now since 2014, 2015. And in the community all over South Florida, what we have heard consistently is I can't find board members, or how do I want to join a nonprofit board and I don't know who's good. That is why we created Board Match Now. That is why we have a tool so that people can use technology like a dating app. They fill out a profile. Angel, you would fill out a profile. You tell us all about you, your professional strengths, your personal characteristics, what causes excite you. You fill out your profile and the system matches you with a nonprofit in our system. It's new, it's growing every day. We're getting new nonprofits in, new board member candidates in, and you look for matches, and then you find someone and you connect. There's a lot of other ways to do it as well. You can go to the Delray Chamber, you can get immersed in the nonprofit chamber group, you can go to networking events all over the county, but it's really, you have to search.
Right.
So we created Board Match Now, so it takes some of that time out of your search and it gets you to a connected match much faster.
And so on the flip side, it would be the same thing for the nonprofits. They just fill out a profile of what they're looking for, and then that's
Correct.
how the process, continues.
Correct.
Wonderful.
And let me tell you this, if the very first question, the cause, the nonprofit describes their cause, the candidate like you, Angel, who's going to go into our system, I feel like after this, you describe, if you're not a fit on cause, you may fit on skills, professional expertise, ability to give, your hours available. But if you don't fit on the cause match, you're not a match in our system.
Right.
It all starts with you gotta love the cause, which I think we made the point very well on today. So.
Yes, you guys did. All right. So I don't see any more questions down below, but I do have one more question for you guys if you have a moment for me. So who should not join a board, or when should you not join a board?
I'll give you the answer to the second question, which is never join a board if you're not prepared to commit to be at the board meetings and commit some time to the enterprise. Don't join the board. Stay away. Until you have the ability to say, I'm going to make those board meetings and I'm going to commit myself to this thing, don't join a board.
All right. That seems pretty simple and straightforward to me.
Yeah, one of the big complaints nonprofits have is when a new board member shows up and they just show up for meetings. They're phoning it in. They may be there live and in person once COVID's over, but they're just showing up for the board meeting, listening, nodding at the appropriate places, and then they're out the door. That's not what you need. That
Right.
doesn't help anybody. That's not helping you or the nonprofit. So don't do that. So someone who's just going to phone it in is not a board member candidate.
Yeah, the way I describe it is that if all you're prepared to do is to go to a board meeting and be an audience member, don't go on the board.
Yes.
Because if you give the CEO the chance to turn you into an audience maker, the CEO will do that.
That's a whole nother story.
That's a whole nother story.
And
I can tell you, there are CEOs out there that love audiences. They don't want boards, right? So if you're going to go there and they ask you to be an audience member and not a board member, you should get off the board immediately, because the bottom line is they don't want a board. They want an audience.
Yeah.
And I won't be an audience member.
No, we want board members.
I'm not a good audience. I am not a good audience.
All right, Jerry and Raylan, thank you so much. I know that we have to have you guys back because you did touch on a couple of other topics that we couldn't go in today, but we're going to want to have you back to talk about. To our viewers, as always, these are recorded. They're on Facebook, YouTube, and the Chamber's website underneath the webinars tab. And just remember, if you have passion and you have time, you can be a board member. You don't have to be a CEO or a CFO. As you've learned today from them, board members come from all walks of life, and we need all sorts of skill sets for our nonprofits out there. And take a look at Board Match now. We know that if that's something that you want to do, they're going to help you find the right board to join. All right, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Appreciate
Take
it.
care.